So, as you know, each month we have different guests who come on and collaborate about certain subjects. And this month, we're delighted to have with us Stephen Carter from the Intellectual Property Works. Stephen is a renowned IP lawyer, and so somebody that we can talk about, how that impacts today's business, how AI affects what goes on there. And I think it'd just be really useful for our audience to have this conversation with Stephen. So let's get into it. So Stephen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. For our viewers, it would be lovely if you could give us a bit of an overview of yourself and what your business does, and just introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting me on, Dean. It's great to have this opportunity.
It's my pleasure.
So my name's Stephen Carter. I'm founder of a business called the Intellectual Property Works, and we work alongside our clients who are typically technology startups and scale-ups and help them understand the role that intellectual property plays in the value of their business and how it plays its part in that growth journey, adds value to the business, makes them attractive to investors. So that's predominantly what I do now. Been doing that for the last about 8 years now. Before that, so my kind of background is that I was a patent attorney, still am a patent attorney, worked in London law firms for just over 20 years, saw the good stuff, saw the bad stuff, learned a lot about how IP help businesses succeed, and also an awful lot about what goes wrong. And I guess some of the work we were doing were fixing the stuff that had gone wrong. So yeah, before that, I was an engineer. So I did an engineering degree many moons ago at university. So technical background, a bit of software stuff along the way, and then that kind of legal strategic layer on top of it, all of which I now apply into this consultancy business, putting people.
That's really interesting, isn't it? The engineering background, because engineering isn't that kind of almost like reverse engineering. Start with the finish in mind and then engineering back to the start, which is what people should be doing when it comes to IP, but not always the case.
Yeah, I think that's right. Engineering, I guess fundamentally engineering is about problem solving, isn't it? It's, as you say,
Yeah.
You know what you want to achieve, and you know where you are today. What are the steps you need to take to get to where you want to be, and whether that's building a rocket ship or building a piece of software, or I guess more relevant for this context, building a business that's going to provide for you in the way you want it to provide, whether that's through succeeding and making your mark on the world, or whether it's through building a big valuation so you can exit and go and lie on a beach in Ibiza or whatever it is you have planned for your future.
And does it matter what type of business you have? Because obviously, you have freelancers, and the next step is maybe they want to build a business, but it's a small business, and then you scale up stage, and then huge business maybe. But do they all need IP?
I think it's an interesting question. It's a good question, and I think I guess the flippant answer is yes. Everyone needs IP, or probably to put it more correctly, it's not that people need IP. Is that for most businesses in the world we live in today, IP is actually at the heart of what they're doing. So IP isn't. But when people think about IP, they think about what I refer to as the IP rights, the protection. So it's the things like the patents and the trademarks and the copyright and the trade secrets. And that is one element of it. But actually what those are, they're legal rights that you can wrap around and use to protect what I'd refer to as the IP assets. And the IP assets are the stuff that we create when we're building a business. It's the brand assets, it's the technical know-how, it's the products you're building, it's the software that you're coding. All of that is intellectual property. And that's, you think about most businesses, if not all businesses today, particularly businesses that are innovating rather than just, and that could be innovation in service delivery, it could be innovation in product. But if you're innovating, you're creating new stuff, that new stuff is fundamentally IP. And that's also where the value in the business is going to be. So it's not really a case of, do we need IP? It's a case of what you need to do whether you're a small business owner or a large business, you need to recognize that actually you have IP and that's where the value is. And once that's the first step on the journey, is recognizing that you've got this stuff and that it's valuable. And then you can start to ask the question about how do we then protect it? How do we keep that value in the business and make sure it doesn't leak out?
It's interesting because, as you may have noticed, we have a couple of accelerators. So one's a personal branding accelerator and one's a business accelerator. Both are hand-holding through those processes because they're very long strategic processes to build And on the business accelerator side, there's an element of that is actually unpacking IP and that people have, and then realizing that they have these unique things and then unpacking that. And then I suppose the next step is thinking about how you protect that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, and I think that's, yeah, those sort of accelerators, I think, are great at forcing people to kind of step back and recognize that value that's there. And as you say, recognizing that they have got this collection of IP that they probably haven't even stopped to think about because it's just kind of what they do. And it's the knowledge that's in their head and they deliver it in a particular way. And yeah, and that is all IP. And I guess that's the other thing that people tend to associate IP with the kind of proper techie stuff. And I guess if I'm honest, that's the stuff that excites me more with the engineering background. It's kind of
Yeah,
techie development stuff where I can really get my teeth into, and IP does play yeah, plays a really important role in those sorts of businesses. In a consultancy business, there's IP at the heart of that business as well because it's the methodologies that they've created, it's the tools that they've developed that support the programs they're delivering or support the clients once they've gone through the programs. All of that is IP. So basically, we're living in a world of IP,
yeah,
but too few business owners and business executives recognize that.
yeah. So where do most people go wrong then starting up? So one is not doing anything. What sort of other ways do businesses screw up the IP, so to speak?
Where do I start? No, so you're right. The first one is it's not so much not doing anything; it's just not even stopping to think or even recognizing that there is this thing I called IP that's at the heart of their business. So yeah, so that's probably the first one. And I guess because they don't recognize that, and because they're not thinking about it from the outset, there's other mistakes that get made which can have serious consequences down the line. I guess over the years, one of the ones that, and I guess just to give this a bit of context,
It's where the juicy stories come out.
yeah, naming no names, of course, but but to give it a bit of context, one of the roles that I played when I was living in law firm world is we'd get involved. I'd get involved in corporate transactions, in investments or acquisitions, and I was the nasty guy that went in and poked and prodded and found all the holes in the IP that we could use. Well, one, so that we could make sure we weren't, or the client wasn't investing in a bad deal. So of course, you use that as leverage to reduce the price.
Yeah,
But anyway, and based on that experience, one of the things that goes wrong most often is IP ownership. I guess yeah, the starting point is if you're going to capture the value in this stuff that's being created for your business, you need to own it. Because if you don't own it, that value is not yours, it's someone else's. And
yeah,
there's a lot of but there's misconception around how you own stuff. And yeah, and for example, if you hire someone, a contractor, or you're working with an external business to write software for you for your business, which a lot of small businesses don't have that in-house employee that are writing the code for them. They're working with a contractor or they're working with a software house. The
sure.
what the law says is that the default position is that the person who writes the code owns the copyright. So they basically own the IP in that code. And just because you're
Interesting.
paying them to do that work, the law doesn't recognize that because you're paying them, that means you must own it. The letter of the law is that they keep it. If they're a contractor, if they're not an employee, the starting point is that they're the owner of it. And a lot of
Mm,
people don't recognize that. Now, as long as you've got an agreement in place with that person or with that business that says that the ownership of that IP will be transferred to
yeah.
the business that the code is being written for, then that's okay. That's fine. That kind of ticks the box. Ownership sits with you,
Well,
capture that value. And yeah, and that typically, if you're working with a reputable contractor or you've got a good standard template for your contracts with these sorts of people, or you're working with a reputable software house, very typically their standard T's and C's will say something along the lines of, as long as you pay us the money you owe us, you get ownership of the copyright and the software code. But
yeah.
not all of them do. I've seen numerous occasions over the years where that's not been the case. And I describe, and it's part of the issue is it's different. The sort of the legal position is different for different types of IP. It's different for different jurisdictions. There's some IP where the transfer does happen automatically in that kind of contractor scenario. There's some where it doesn't. But in all cases,
Sounds like a minefield.
it is a minefield. But in all cases, you can override what the default legal position is with an appropriate contract. And that's the bit that gets overlooked and forgotten about because people aren't thinking about IP and that's where the value is. And I guess the issue with that is that it's not one of those problems that smacks you in the face at the time.
Yeah.
I describe it often as like a ticking time bomb because you don't know it's there, and it's ticking away in the background, and it's ticking.
So how does that, I'm intrigued. So how does that transfer into this AI world that we're in? I'm well aware that obviously we're in a content creation world, so I'm well aware that there are some question marks over who owns the IP if you get to use tools like CapCut or Descript, for example. And probably if you go into the fine writing there, then they probably own the IP. So how does that factor when you've got all of this AI stuff? Because I think a lot of startups are starting to use tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Descript. Almost everything now has AI in it as well. Yeah. Is that a thing? Do you know that yet? Is that a thing that you can help the viewers understand? Or not really.
It's not. I think so. So definitely, it's an even bigger minefield, or best way to describe it, more dense minefield. There's more mines you can stand on. Certainly, we'll take it in a few different steps. But I guess the first step is if you're using those tools to create content or to support your product design process or to write code for you, it flows from the point I was just making, which is it comes down ultimately to contract. And when you start using any of these AI tools, there'll be terms and conditions that you've probably not read. You've probably wheeled it, you scroll to the bottom of the page as quick as you can, and you click the box that says I agree to your terms and conditions. And I've read them.
Yeah.
They haven't.
Fast-paced startups, entrepreneurs. Yeah, I haven't got time for that. Yeah, we'll do
Click, click.
that.
And by going click, click, you might well have, as you said, you might well have just agreed that they keep all of the IP in the information in the prompts that you're uploading, in
Yeah.
the content that's being generated. The big risk, and there's some good examples of this,
Yeah.
is particularly if you're working in kind of technical innovation and product innovation, particularly if you're using free versions of some of these AI tools, very often the terms and conditions will say that they're free, even if the ownership position is unclear or maybe clear and that you own the stuff. It'll quite often say that they can use whatever you upload to the system as training data for their models. And so there was a good example. It was one of the mobile phone companies. I think it was Samsung, if I remember rightly, where they had people in their business, and this is going back quite a few years in the relatively early days of having AI systems or web-based AI systems that would support coding, and they were putting bits of their code, source code, into the cloud and
Yeah.
asking it to improve it, or how do I make it do this, and that got incorporated. Their proprietary code got incorporated into the AI model and was then revealed to other people working in the same space. And there was a big furore about it at the time. But basically, they'd given away their proprietary, trade secret information.
And I suppose there's also on the flip side of that compliance as well that goes into that,
Yeah,
possibly.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're
Interesting.
sharing customer, if you're putting customer information into these tools, you could be in breach of some of the GDPR regulations around looking after their personal information. And so that's one kind of area. And typically, as long as you're a bit savvy, and particularly if you're using the kind of paid versions of the tools, and you make the right configuration settings, so it's not using your data to train their models, then you're on much safer ground. So that's one whole kind of minefield area where kind of these AI tools and IP overlap, and there's serious risk of your proprietary IP leaking out of the business. And then I guess probably the other area, which you mentioned at the outset, was who owns this stuff. It feeds into the ownership thing I was talking about previously, which is
Yeah.
if you put in a couple of prompts to ChatGPT and it comes back with a whole load of a dozen LinkedIn posts that you're going to post, who actually owns that content? And the legal framework about IP ownership is still struggling to play catch up and come to terms with that. So the position, I guess it's not a new problem in some sense because there's always been computer generated content.
Yeah.
And the laws do address that. Most sort of copyright laws, for example, they'll say that if it's computer generated, then the owner of the copyright is the person who was controlling the computer that caused that content to be generated. When courts have been asked about the AI side of things, there's been a few cases that have come up. That's been the starting point. Well, is surely the same kind of rules apply? But I think we're getting to a point now where people are starting to question it again, because there's the ultimate content that's generated is so detached from the prompt that the person has put in, or which is that's the person controlling the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it raises a whole host of interesting questions that aren't necessarily easy to answer. But yeah,
And what about when you go into a world of, because there are now, I mean, coding as an example. So ChatGPT coding, yeah, absolutely. But I'm talking more, I don't know if you're familiar with a company called Replit.com.
I
Company
have
called
heard.
Replit. So they used to be a company that had lots of different coders, and so they would charge people for really good coding, and they had people doing it. But then they realized where we were going, and so now you pay $20 and you can have AI work with you as your assistant and code for you, which I think I had a go and I built a website on their platform, and it is very good. Although I noticed that I went around the houses a little bit. One give it one prompt and it does one thing, but then the other thing breaks, and then give it that prompt and then the other thing breaks. I don't have the patience to do it. But the imagery and things that came up was fantastic, and I built a website in a couple of hours and playing around with that. So in that scenario, that gets crazy as well, because again, who owns the coding aspect, and is that something for people to be looking at when they're going to use these AI tools to speed things up?
I think, yeah, definitely. You hope when it's a paid for service like that, that they'd have sensible T's and C's that make it clear who owns it. Although,
I didn't even read them, but that's,
no, no, and people don't, and that's part of the problem. And it comes back to, particularly when you're in startup mode, you just need to get
yeah.
stuff done, and you can't. It's just not practical to I was gonna say cross all the I's, cross all the T's and dot all the I's as you go
Mm.
along. You run really quickly. And yeah, I guess the practical reality is that in a lot of cases, it will be okay. There might be stuff that where the T's and C's aren't favorable to you, but in a lot of cases, it just never matters at a practical level. But when it does, I guess the problem is you don't know when it's going to matter and when it's not going to.
Well, let me give you an example where I got a bit squeaky bum with it. The intention was actually, I quite like this, is great. And I always wanted to have a client portal in the background. So I wanted to be able to, for things like content approval. So we have a marketing agency, so we're doing all sorts of service, LinkedIn, SEO, those kind of things. And often we have to approve content. It gets really tricky because often we're working over email, and so there's no sophisticated piece of tech that we're using. We just have a process and a system. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could upload it, they have to approve it, and everything is documented in this site? So that's why I wanted to try this Replit, because I wanted to build that and see if it could build a back-end system. And it did really well. But like I say, then because I think what I built was so technical that I ended up fixed the back end and then it broke the front end, and I just thought I can't. But if I had gone and done that, you could imagine then I would have client information going in and content that's produced by our team, so by humans, but probably aided in the research by AI in areas. And so that becomes tricky then, doesn't it? Because you've got all those different aspects going on.
It does, it does. And yeah, and I guess the other thing going on there is you don't know when you're asking some of these tools to help you, whether it's producing content or code or whatever it may be, you don't know where they're taking their, let's call it inspiration from. And so you
Mm.
also see scenarios where other people's IP is being incorporated into your product, your content without you knowing. And again, yeah, as a practical matter, in most cases, they'll never get found out, it'll never matter. But once in a while, someone will spot something in your product and go, hang on a minute, that's mine. They nicked that off me. And yeah, and obviously that's gone on since life began, people pinching stuff off other people. But I think the
Yeah.
sort of added layer of risk that you have now with these AI tools is that It might be the AI tool that's doing it, and you don't. Yeah, you've made no conscious decision to rip someone else off, but actually you have just inadvertently done it because that's what the AI tool's done in the background. It's gone off and found a nice image from somewhere, plonked it on your website, unbeknownst to you. It's pinched it from a Getty library or something, and then but you as the website owner are the ones that get in trouble for that. And yeah,
Yeah, I can imagine that a lot of businesses, not just startups and even scale-ups, probably at every level, will try to cut corner because that's by nature you want to get the quickest, fastest route. But obviously you want to try to be diligent and strategic in how you move quick, fail fast, etc. So I suppose with that, how does that represent in terms of do most businesses work that way, or are most business owners quite savvy and will be doing the IP right? Like, what's the percentage on that? Because I could imagine quite a high percentage don't do it what they probably should, and a low percentage, or is it more kind of the other way around? What do you think?
I think so. Based on my experience, what I've seen, I think you're right. I think it's quite a low percentage that recognize the importance of IP and do it right from the outset. I
Yeah.
think there's and yeah, and but also I guess at the other extreme, there's probably also quite a small percentage of businesses that recklessly ignore IP, and but most businesses are in between those two extremes where they're not intentionally doing stuff wrong. They're just getting on doing stuff, but without the right kind of knowledge or support or understanding, and yeah, and getting a lot of stuff wrong as a result, which
So the businesses
isn't
that you
immediately.
work with,
Say again, sorry.
I was going to say the businesses that you work with. So what's the journey for them? So when, they come on board, and what sorts of things do you look to try and implement and do with them?
So it tends to be, so as I say, the kind of the stuff that excites me and the businesses that I enjoy working most with are the ones where there's technical innovation going on. So whether, yeah, that might be building software, it might be building a more kind of tangible physical product. And there's normally something that's triggered them to come and talk to me. So it might be that they're looking for it to raise a round of investment, and some of the initial conversations they've had with potential investors have raised questions around just something simple like the investor said, "What's your IP position?" or "Do you have patents?" or and they've blustered an answer and thought, "Oh, actually, we haven't got a Scooby about this. What we better go. I better go and talk to someone that maybe knows something about it." And that's often the trigger for someone to initiate a conversation with me. And
Yeah.
then the starting point in most cases is what I'd refer to as an IP audit, which is basically just let's working with the business to understand what the business does, how they either make revenue currently, how they plan to generate revenue, what the kind of structure is in terms of who does what within the business and where the development happens. Is it by employees within the business? Is it external? So it's kind of getting that really good picture of the business. Then based on that, mapping out what IP assets they currently have and what protection they do or don't have in place for that. And I guess there's a bit of it's a bit of a gap analysis. It's what have you got? How are you looking? How are you looking after it? Yeah, either by because you've planned it or because just through luck the ownership things worked out, and then based on that come out with a series of recommendations. Looking forwards, there's this stuff we've got to fix straight away, because if you don't fix it, that's definitely going to be uncovered in investor due diligence when you're looking to raise your next 3 million or whatever it is. But then also here's a plan you can put in place to make sure you're capturing that value effectively going forwards. So that tends to be the starting point. And there might be as part of that a little bit of competitor intelligence stuff going on as well. Let's see what the competitors are doing from an IP through an IP lens. Are they filing lots of patents? Is it a market where patent filings are normal, and do you need to be doing that? And some of that depends on. I always think it's really important to think about IP in its business context. I think again, too many people think about it as this kind of almost academic thing that is a bolt on to the business that is a nice to have. Where actually, yeah, where we started this conversation, IP is fundamental to the value in the business, but the IP protection is one of the business tools you can use to help build that value. But that only works if it's aligned with what the business is trying to achieve and what you as the business owners are looking to achieve. If you're looking for an exit in 3 years' time through acquisition by one of the bigger players in the field, you can improve your chances of that happening successfully if you look at, as best you can from the public data, look at what that potential acquirer's IP strategy is. And then you can start to mirror that in what you're doing in your IP strategy. So
it's that kind of, it's going back to that engineering, isn't it? Think with the end in mind,
exactly,
and then
exactly.
start from the start. That's quite an interesting subject. We had a guest on recently, Sandy Goddard, and so she tends to work a lot with people who are looking for an exit. And so one of the first things that she very early on to all of her conversations is looking at, so what's the exit strategy, or is there an exit? What's the plan? And then put something in place and work with people. So this sounds quite similar then. If people were wise enough, and I'm sure if it was VC backed or something, then they probably would be thinking that way. What's the IP that you need at the end when you want to get the investor, or you want to raise the value of the company or the exit that you're going to have? You need to think about that a little bit earlier. And I suppose the only reason that maybe a lot of startups don't think about that is just a lack of knowledge in terms of the business world and also IP in general at the start.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I guess that's the other sort of commonality with most of the businesses I'm working with, is that they are working towards an exit, or at least some kind of business goal generally. If you're running what term do they use, like a lifestyle business, where, yes, maybe you register your trademark because you want to tick that box. Two, it is in your interest, even if you've got no grand ambitions to grow quickly, it's still in your interest to be able to stop other people using the same or a very similar brand for the same sorts of products or services, because that just causes confusion and potentially damages reputation. So there's merit in that, even for those businesses that don't have ambitions to grow and exit. But I think certainly where I can add most value, and where therefore the businesses I tend to be working with are those ones that certainly have growth plans, significant growth plans, which means they're either going to be having to take on significant investment, or inevitably they'll be taking on investment along the way, but probably also have some idea of an exit horizon in the next 5 years or so.
And that's one of the really important things for those investors, isn't it? What is your IP, and what do you have?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some investors are very savvy and they understand the IP stuff very well. I think all investors, I guess if investors generally, aren't they? They're concerned about the moat around the business.
Yeah.
And in a lot of businesses, IP or the IP protection can play quite a significant part in helping form that moat. Yeah, and there's other things that help towards that moat, having a great team and the rest of it. But IP can be quite a significant part of that. I think you do get some investors who, I guess, make the same mistake that a lot of businesses do, is that when you talk about IP, they immediately think about patents, and the investors are there banging the patent drum, and actually patents aren't always the right answer. And
Interesting.
I've talked to some small businesses where, particularly in this AI focused businesses or software focused businesses more generally, patents may be appropriate, but actually the better protection can sometimes be through a trade secret strategy, where you basically keep your algorithms under the bonnet and you never reveal them. And some of the work I do with those sort of businesses is giving them the answer that they can give to investors that they're talking to, who are banging that patent drum. Because generally that conversation goes along the lines of, they have a conversation with the investor says, have you got any patents? And they'll be, no, not yet, but that's in the plan, and that's what we're going to spend some of your money on. But actually that's not necessarily the right answer. And sometimes the better answer is, our strategy doesn't rely on patents. It's about protecting the value in the business using this trade secret strategy. And you can help build a narrative that they can present to the investors and capture it in a slide or two that they might put in the deck. But
and if they do have this trade secret strategy, then don't tell ChatGPT or Perplexity.
Exactly, yeah.
In case they give it away. So look, I think AI is going to develop fairly quickly, I think. And so sometimes when I make predictions about what's going to happen in the next 6 months or year, depends who you're talking to. If it's a complete technophobe and they just look at you like you are crazy, absolutely crazy. But I do think it's developing really fast. And so I think there's some crazy things coming within a year. So how does IP evolve from here? That's probably a really big question, but in your eyes, like what can you see happening, or how might it evolve, and what should people look out for?
It's a really interesting question. And I think, yeah, one of the struggles always with IP, if you think about it from the kind of legal IP perspective, is that laws change really slowly. Like the written law on the paper changes really slowly. And then the interpretation of those words also changes at a much slower pace than the world around it evolves. And you see it with, you look, copyright's a really good illustrator that way. Copyright didn't even deal really initially very well with software at all. And then the court started interpreting it to cover software, and then the legislation changed to cover software. And I think that we're at that phase at the minute where the courts are trying to grapple with kind of, I guess, what you probably call out of date law to make it fit this new AI world we're in. I suspect the legislation will have to change to catch up. But who knows what direction it's going to go. So that's one angle. But then I think, and I don't know if this really answers the question or not, but one of the things I was thinking about as you were asking the question then was actually the impact that AI is having on the IP world as well. So we're seeing
It must be really hard for a start for you to keep a track, keep abreast. Probably strange times more than ever that you've got to try and keep abreast with what's happening.
Yeah, certainly as that AI technology evolves, trying to make sure we understand that and help clients working in that space, making sure that my knowledge keeps up to be able to advise them in the best way as to how they can protect it. But then also just the impact that AI tools are having on the IP space itself. There aren't any patent search firms out there now that don't at least say they use AI to help with the patent search side of things. I think there's some firms that are doing it really well. So I'm working with one startup business in that space at the minute. It's quite interesting actually, because it's almost like they're building a tool, say called, I don't know if I'm allowed to plug them or not, you can cut it out if you don't want to, but they're called Ingenuity AI, and they're building a tool that
We'll give them a plug. Why not?
that uses the patent data to help innovators. So it's almost like an exploratory tool of, I've got this problem I want to solve, how might I solve it? And it uses the kind of the patent literature to help suggest solutions. Yeah, so it's really quite interesting, but it's a tool that I can see myself using with other clients, but I'm also helping this client understand how they can protect that tool in this new evolving AI world. So it's quite it's exciting and interesting, but it is challenging as well.
Yeah.
And then we're also seeing, it seems like there's new AI tools. You see it all the time, I'm sure, across all of the spheres that you work in. But looking at the IP sphere that I work in specifically, even there, seems like every other day there's a new tool to help you write a patent application or to help you analyze objections from the patent office.
And there's probably a few minefields there as well, depending on what you use and
exactly. Yeah. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone this morning, just not specifically about the IP stuff, but just about the AI generally and how quickly these new tools are coming and how almost you're paralyzed. Yeah, you're trying to choose the best tool to help you do the job that you're doing at that particular time. But by the time you've decided tool A might be the best one, there's another 3 tools that have appeared that seem to do the same thing. And maybe I should be using one of them instead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm experiencing this thing at the moment and talking to a lot of businesses about, because there's all these tools that keep coming out, and one of the annoying things that is there to protect us is more on the security side of things, is the 2FA that comes into play, and especially where businesses like ours has global teams, and so it becomes so problematic, and a lot of these companies are very hot and on their security, which is there to protect you. But if you have, like we have, probably 20 products in our tech stack, but really we could grow that to 30 quite easily. But the fear of God is that none of them talk to each other, and the 2FA is really annoying. So on the security aspect, there's something big that I think is going to need to be fixed there, because if in the future you have a tech stack of 50 different AI things that make your business go faster, none of them, you'd need to have a degree in Zapier, etc. So I'd imagine things are coming out really quickly, and that probably has the same kind of implementations or risks from an IP side of things.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think yeah, the other risk side of it, which is I guess it's IP related, but maybe slightly tangential, is these particularly the large language model based tools.
Mm.
They do still make stuff up.
Yeah,
So I've used two or three of the different tools and tried to just to have experimented with a bit of legal research. And in fact, there's been some reported cases recently where people have written court papers that have been submitted to the courts, and they've included citations of previous court cases that don't exist because
yeah.
ChatGPT made them up, and, and they've not checked it. And
Yeah, it's crazy.
so there's that kind of liability. Yeah, and the question is who's. I think in those scenarios, it's very clear that it's the lawyer that submitted the papers is the one that's going to be liable for having screwed up. But I think that's quite a clear cut case. But there's other cases where the hallucinations that are introduced are probably more subtle. And where does the liability lie if, as a result of that hallucination, a bit of wrong advice is given or someone?
It comes back to that, doesn't it? You're only as good as the prompt. And also with AI, you're only as good as the person in control of the AI. So if the person in control of the AI is really very clever, anyhow, then you're probably going to get a good outcome. But it's that prompt engineering. And I think that comes down to the hallucinations as well. So we use ChatGPT quite a lot. That's our chosen model. There are other models. In terms of more research assistant, so when we're going to do a podcast talk like this, a podcast style talk, then obviously we're going to do some research and we'll look at and try to understand a lot more in your world and do some deep research. And it's really great for that. But again, if we're ever going to use anything, then we want to double check, is this factual? Here's their website. Here's I need to know, is this factual? And then often then it will correct itself in terms of, actually, you're quite right. I made that up. And you get the real thing then. So if you're well aware when using AI that you need to fact check and you need to be careful with it, then you can probably get where you need to be. But most people, a lot of people won't do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's kind of analogies with the IP world there as well, aren't there? It's like you don't know what you don't know. So if you're used to working with these large language models and you know that they hallucinate, you can manage the way you use them to cater for that. And
Do you think
similarly,
that people always will have a place because of that? I always say in sales, people from people, and I think now you can have complete AI agents and you can do everything with AI, really. Inbound, outbound, commenting, social. So the need for some of the stuff even that we do as content creators for clients, it goes away. But I still think people want to work with people for those reasons. Right now, it's probably not safe enough unless you already know what you're doing.
I think that's probably right. As long as people continue to recognize that they need that kind of expert overview, I suppose is the best way of looking at it. I think inevitably, yeah, the kind of prevalence of AI in what you do, what I do, is going to grow. And I think if anyone tries to deny that, then they're going to be the ones that get left behind. So I think you have to recognize that it's here to stay, but you need to understand its weaknesses. And in some ways, it means that we probably, in lots of different areas of business, but I think certainly in your area, in my area, it elevates us to that actually, for me, more interesting, exciting place of the strategic thinker and the expert.
Mm.
You let the AI chunter away underneath doing the more mundane stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah,
So you still do what only you can do, and the AI
yeah,
does.
yeah, and yeah, maybe that'll change as well. I'm sure if we'd been having this conversation 5 years ago, certainly I probably wouldn't have predicted that the AI tools would have become as powerful as they already are today. So who knows in 5 years' time? Hopefully, another 5 years' time, I'll be sat on a beach.
I was watching. I follow this guy, Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you Gary V. I don't know if you know him at all. And so he's a very well known kind of content chap anyway. And he was saying on one of his speeches he was doing on a stage, and somebody said things are just moving so quickly now, and they never have before. And he said, "Listen, go wake up your great grandparents." and wake them up and say, listen, this is what's going on today, so you can come and join it, or you can, they'd be jumping back into their grave quicker than they came up. They wouldn't want to live in this world. So things move fast all the time. It's just going to move faster.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm intrigued from personal branding point of view, just because we do personal branding. So if I write a book, if I record a podcast or create a framework, for example, how do I protect that IP?
It's increasingly difficult, probably, when you create that kind of content. So you will have, if it's original content, you will have copyright in it. So there's copyright there. But one, you need to be able to demonstrate that it was original. You need to be able to demonstrate that you were the person who created it. So some of it is around good record keeping. So that's one element, is like proving that it's your original stuff in the first place. And then in terms of how do you protect it, in the sense of what do you do if someone else starts copying it? I think I guess the starting point, and I think the important decision is, or important thing to think about is, like, why do you want to stop them? A lot of individuals that are big content creators, their probably knee-jerk reaction is, they bloody copied my stuff, I've got to stop them, because is that kind of emotional reaction.
I think that if somebody copied my stuff, I think that's a compliment. But it's a big enough world. There's enough business out there. Someone wants to copy my stuff, then fair play to them. Just let them get on with it.
Well,
We all copy each other. I'll copy some of theirs too.
and that's what so that's where I was coming
No.
from. Actually, that's the right answer, and it's very much about picking your fights. Yeah, because sometimes someone will be taking your content and using it in a way that is either actually seriously damaging your business, because they're taking significant customers from you, because they're somehow persuading that customer that they're the originator of that work and they ought to come to you, or they're using it in a way that is damaging your reputation. And I think if that is happening, then they're the fights that you've got to go into battle with.
And what do you think I think where there's a sea of AI content coming, and you have things like Vera 3 getting much better. So aka Gary Vee was saying, and in a lot of his content recently, that a year from now you won't know if it's me or it's not me. The only way you'll know it's me if I put it into blockchain. And I found that really interesting, because I was like, what? No, that's very futuristic. So lately, over the last kind of few months since I've seen those videos, and we talked to our C-suite execs about the personal branding side of things, part of that is in protection. The reason they would do that now, to create that personal brand, is in protection against someone coming out with a video of them that's realistic. And I find that really crazy, interesting world. Where would we be with the IP of that? I suppose no, unless you can prove the source.
Yeah, I mean, it does all come back to having that building and having that strong brand, because there's elements of the brand that you can definitely protect with registered trademark protection, for example. So yeah, the name, the logos that you use, the other brand elements in terms of the sort of look and feel of the brand, that you can potentially wrap quite strong protection around. And that's I think is what, in a lot of these cases, people will have to fall back on, and hopefully they've got that strong protection in place, because that's the sort of the big stick that you can hit people with if they're generating basically copycat use. And but it's a fascinating world, that, like, this whole, we've seen it, haven't we, with the Hollywood actors and stuff recently, where the studio is threatening to use the Gen AI versions of them in future movies and sound.
There's some that believe the same with music artists, because in our Tenacious AI apps, we have a music generator. And someone asked me the other day, can it create lyrics? And I said, no. I mean, it's one for the developers, but I'm sure there's probably some questions there. But the idea of that is to generate music for your jingles, for your radio adverts, to go behind your content, so that it's unique. Again, now that you've mentioned it, is it unique? Where does it come from? There's probably some
and that's the thing. And it's difficult. It's difficult.
Unique.
Because you get real world example, you get putting AI to one side, You get examples of artists who create music that ends up sounding similar, but they've created it independently without reference to the other person's music. And that's not copyright infringement, because copyright, you have to actually copied. But then that area becomes very grey when you get into AI generated music, because is it copied or not? And it's very difficult to understand what the factual situation is. Is it that the generative AI model has created a bit of music that sounds very similar to an existing bit of music just by coincidence? Or is it that the model has been trained on that specific bit of music, and so it effectively is just regurgitating it, which would be copyright? But it's super difficult to, from a technical perspective, to pick that apart and understand what the seed of that new bit of music was.
Sounds like you've got a tough job. So thinking of our audience and viewers, who typically I would imagine are going to be startups who want some free tips from us to build their business. So if you could give, I don't know, what, top 3 or top 5 tips. So you've started a business today, you know where you're going to be going, or you've at least got some kind of structure to what you want to build. What would be the top 5 tips that you'd give to those starting? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, no. Top 5 tips. I think hopefully it comes out of a lot of the conversation we've just been having. So I think number 1 is really just to recognize that in the world today, whatever if you're innovating, if you're creating new stuff, and it's not just a business where you're reselling other people's stuff or whatever, but if you're creating new stuff, then you are de facto creating new IP. So it's just recognizing that's tip 1. Like, just have that mindset. I'm creating new IP if I'm innovating. So I think that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 would be having recognized that you're creating IP, and that's basically what's underpinning the value of your business. Make sure you own it. And that doesn't have to be necessarily going through contracts with a fine tooth comb, although that would be the ideal. But at least have that conversation with the people you're working with, if they're contractors, if they're external agencies you're working with. Just have that conversation. Say, I will own this at the end, won't I? And hopefully that flushes out any issues around ownership early. So what's that? That's 2. So I guess 3 is what would I put as third priority? And I'm trying to think of things that you can do early doors without having to spend lots of money or engaging experts, fundamentally. And so I think the third thing is good record keeping, actually, which is good practice for a lot of different reasons within a business. But again, that's one of the issues that I've seen over the years is you've created something, you definitely own it because it was created by an employee, and then you get 3 years down the line and one of your competitors is ripping you off. The onus is very much on you to show that it was your original thing in the first place. And if you don't have good contemporaneous records that you can fall back on to demonstrate that, then you're pretty much screwed. Yeah, you did.
And what is good records? What do they look like? Is that difficult to answer?
It is difficult to answer, but it's more about if you have good kind of process and you've just stuck with that process. For a lot of software development, it happens automatically if you set yourself up right in the first place. So if you get your GitHub repository set up, hopefully like in the company name, this is one of the other things that I haven't touched on but often goes wrong, is you get a couple of people get together, think they're going to start a business. One of them's already got a GitHub repository, say, because they're the codey guy, and they started creating the code within there, but actually that repository has no kind of legal connection with the business that they then incorporate, and you then end up with these other ownership issues. But anyway, that kind of aside, I think so. If you've got that kind of structured, process-driven approach to creating the code, then you probably don't need anything more. So it's not like you're having to create new records or new systems. It's just being a bit organized and have process-driven, and in terms of the content creation side of things.
Yeah.
And for other content, it might just be that you just have a good organized archive of the content that's being created. So that's 3. I think 4 is be conscious about confidentiality, and because that kind of sets you up to be able to make decisions about trade secrets and whether you want patent protection or not. Because one of the crucial things about patent protection, if you do decide to go down that route, is that you can only get protection for stuff that's still secret when you file your first patent application. So if you think that might be an option, or if you think that actually this stuff, the algorithms I'm creating, the code I'm creating, will have value by keeping it secret because we don't want it to get into the competitor hands, have the right processes and agreements in place from the outset for that as well. Some people will say NDAs aren't worth the paper they were written on, and that might be the case in some cases, but actually from a sort of being able to demonstrate to investors that you're looking after stuff, to be able, if you're going down the patent route, having those NDAs in place, or just having a good standard template NDA that you insist people sign before you share any of that juicy information with them. That's, I guess, that's probably the fourth one, is it?
Yeah.
And then what's the fifth one? Fifth one's probably get some good advice.
That's when they come to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or just, and again, it doesn't have to be.
And on that note, Stephen, I'll put a link to your link in the comments so that people can come to you if they wanna feel that they need to reach out to somebody.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Yeah, and I think, but I guess summing all of that up, it's really just think about IP. And just think about it in a really practical, non-legal sense. It's this stuff that I'm creating that's going to be at the heart of the value of the business. So I really ought to be looking after it. I think if you have that kind of mindset, then you'll do a lot of the right stuff naturally without having paid lots of money to lawyers to tell you to do it.
And typically entrepreneurship and things you're running at 100 miles an hour, there's lots of things to look out for. And some people would say, I don't have the time for that, but it's just whether you value it or not. So hopefully this conversation opens up that value to people that maybe weren't thinking about it, who can now make a better informed opinion. So appreciate that.
I think that sums it up nicely. It's just, if you know about it and you know that it is where a lot of the value lies, then naturally you at least give it a little bit of thought and hopefully make fewer of the mistakes than you might have made otherwise.
Do you think that there's anything that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
I don't think so. We went off on some interesting tangents that were less IP related, but they're quite interesting anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think there's a lot of nice, juicy stuff in there that gets people thinking, at least just raises the awareness for them, what they should be thinking about.
I'm always happy to talk about this sort of stuff. So.
Cool. It's been a pleasure talking to you again.
Yeah, likewise. Good to catch.
Nice. Love that. Listen, I'm gonna have to dash.
No worries.
But yeah, it was a pleasure. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you, and I'll speak to you soon.
Subscribe to your channel as well now. I did that today.
Oh, good. Well, you can track how it goes then.
All right. Take care.
Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.